Welcome to the Early Bird Podcast with Andrew Garrison. My name is Andrew Garrison. This is a show where we talk about sports in the state of Indiana. It is a very busy day in the state of Indiana. The Colts have made some big-time free agency moves, including the addition of a quarterback. The Pacers had an incredible win in the final 10 seconds last night against the Bucks, and we're previewing the Big Ten tournament for both Purdue and Indiana, and then sort of, whipping around the rest of the NFL, some of these other big quarterback moves around the league. Thank you so much for tuning in. This episode's going to look a little bit different. It's not going to sound any different, most likely. But as you might be able to tell, I have a new mic stand. If you're a regular watcher or listener of this show, you'll know that the last mic stand, one of the legs on it broke. So, of course, I had to make a change. This one's a little bit taller. I think I like the change. It makes it feel a bit more radio-esque. It makes it feel a bit more like an audio podcast. I like that feeling a lot. I feel more comfortable in my chair. It looks a little different. The camera angle is higher. There's more blank space with the curtain, less of the lamp being at the top and my head, I suppose. I don't know, but I like the change. I think it's different, so I hope that you all agree. And this will be the first episode with the new mic stand with plenty to talk about, as I mentioned. We're going to start with the Indianapolis Colts. Now, that's kind of unconventional for this show. Typically, we start with, of course, the teams that are actively playing games. But this Colts news is a big deal, in my opinion, and because the Colts are the team that we care about the most on this show, them alongside the Pacers, we're, of course, going to talk about them at the forefront. Daniel Jones signs with the Indianapolis Colts for a one-year, $14 million deal. The intent is to provide competition for Anthony Richardson. So the intent of this move is not to replace Anthony Richardson right away necessarily out of the gate, but it's to provide competition. So in training camp, throughout the offseason, and even potentially throughout the game season, we're going to see competition between Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson. Now, this is a big move. It's not as flashy if you're a national fan of the NFL, and if the Colts are just another random team in the AFC South, you may not care all that much about this move. But it's a big deal to us as Colts fans because, to me, it signifies that the Colts don't really have a QB1 at all. Because if we're considering Daniel Jones to theoretically be at an equal playing field with Anthony Richardson, that implies that Anthony Richardson is not quite a starting level quarterback right now in this moment, because Daniel Jones isn't a starting level quarterback. Remember, Daniel Jones, he was benched. He was released by the Giants. He ended up on the Vikings and now is on the Indianapolis Colts. Anthony Richardson was also benched, and yes, he came back in and he's had injury issues and he's younger, and there's a whole, it's totally different situations. But Anthony Richardson now being in competition with Daniel Jones implies to me that at this moment, neither one of these quarterbacks are capable or perhaps deserving of being the starting quarterback in Indianapolis, and they're using training camp in the beginning of the season to prove that one of them does fill that role. And if neither one of them fills that role by the end of the season, Daniel Jones is on a one-year deal. Anthony Richardson is, of course, young and currently not costing as much as maybe he will in the future. It's very easy for Indianapolis to then say, okay, we're moving on from both of you. Daniel Jones, one-year deal. We're not going to renew it. Anthony Richardson, we're moving on. We're drafting a quarterback. Maybe we're bringing somebody else in of a bit more of a higher pedigree than Daniel Jones, perhaps. That's the conversation that will be happening after the end of this year. If neither one of these players fulfill the prophecy or fulfill the hope that they're going to be the starting quarterback in the Indianapolis Colts. So again, I don't think right now on this day, in March of 2025, we have a QB1 in Indianapolis. I think that Anthony Richardson is a step behind that. Daniel Jones a step behind that. They're both looking to make that step forward, and if neither of them do it, it's a complete hard reset of the quarterback position after this season in Indianapolis. And if one of them does, and they're awesome, and we go to the playoffs and win a Super Bowl, that's exactly what the best case scenario is and what the hope would be. My concern is that splitting reps between these two in training camp and splitting reps between these two during the season is going to perhaps lower both of their ceilings, right? Because at the end of the day, what's the best case scenario? Well, the best case scenario is one of the two situations where either Anthony Richardson wins this quarterback competition, he plays well, he's young, he's incredible, he becomes our franchise quarterback, we go to the playoffs and we improve from there until we win a Super Bowl with him, or Daniel Jones comes in and kind of has a Sam Darnold type of storyline where he ends up being fantastic, playing well, kicking out Richardson. We extend Daniel Jones. Both of these situations are less likely if we split their reps in half, right? Anthony Richardson, what's his biggest problem? There's a lot, but one of them is, of course, experience. One of the issues that, at least at a glance, you look at with Anthony Richardson is, well, he didn't play that much in college, especially compared to guys like Jaden Daniels or Bo Nix, right? The guys that played a lot in college have a lot of games. It doesn't even have to be big games, but that, of course, helps too. Those who played a lot and those who have a lot of reps under their belt, a lot of close game situations under their belt, they're the ones that are shining in the NFL. Anthony Richardson is an example of someone that doesn't have that. He doesn't have very many games underneath his belt from his college career, and that's going to sort of postpone his success in the NFL. So if we take away more practice reps and maybe take away even more game reps, that to me is going to limit the ceiling that Anthony Richardson has to potentially have success moving forward. And similarly, Daniel Jones is going to have less of an ability to maximize his acclimation to the system, right? Daniel Jones, new team, new players, new offense coordinator, new head coach, everything like that. Daniel Jones it's going to take him a little bit more time to sort of get acclimated to all of that. The loser of this quarterback battle, to me, loses their place in the league, at least as a starter. Daniel Jones, this is his last chance, right? This is his last chance to have any hope of being a starter in this league. I think it is for Anthony Richardson, too, because I just think that the consistency of the failure in Indianapolis and the nature of the failures in Indianapolis, if they were to continue, would indicate that he's not ready to be a starting quarterback. He could be a great Malik Willis, but I don't think he could be a Lamar Jackson if this season goes poorly for Anthony Richardson once again. Now, I don't think that this move of grabbing Daniel Jones is going to end up being the right move for Indianapolis. In my opinion, we should be going in on all in on Anthony Richardson this season. And this deal is evidence of why it certainly supports that idea, because Daniel Jones is here for 1 year, right? So if this Daniel Jones move doesn't work out, we could consider this a lost year and just move on. But that's the timeline we would have with Anthony Richardson anyway, right? Because at the end of the day, a lot of Colts fans thought that this offseason should be the offseason that we hard reset, fire the coach, move on from the quarterback, fire the GM. We didn't do any of those things. So to me, I'm thinking, okay, Anthony Richardson, theoretically fully healthy, theoretically ready to go for this upcoming season, where he understands that it's kind of his last year to really prove the fact that he deserves to be in the NFL still. Same situation for Shane Steichen. At this point, surely the same situation for Chris Ballard. These three guys, we reload, release it, we reset. We have 1 more year. We give Anthony Richardson everything we can give him to provide him with the ability to succeed, and then we see if he succeeds. And if he doesn't, then we're moving on. After the season, we're moving on. And there's a lot of factors that go into why that would be the idea. Number one, Anthony Richardson probably does deserve 1 more season at least. The quarterback draft class is not very deep this year. It potentially could be better the next season. So Anthony Richardson is a guy that we're basically saying, you deserve 1 more shot. We're not moving on from you just yet, but we're going to bring in competition. And the worst case scenario is the same, regardless of whether or not Daniel Jones is here or not. If Daniel Jones comes in, right, and neither him or Anthony Richardson pan out and end up being franchise quarterback caliber players, then we move on from both of them because Daniel Jones is on a one year deal, and then we completely reset and find a new quarterback, whether it's through free agency next season or whether it's through the draft, and we move forward from there with a new quarterback, a new vision, and a new plan for success. The only losses of potentially bringing in Daniel Jones and not going all in on Anthony Richardson for this season is, first of all, the cap space, which to me isn't a huge deal because it's just a 1 year, $14 million deal. I'm not overly concerned about that. But also, it's the opportunity for Anthony Richardson to succeed. And that second point might be why we're setting ourselves up for failure with this move. Because again, what's the worst case scenario if we don't bring in Daniel Jones? If we go all in on Anthony Richardson and we say, okay, Anthony Richardson, you have the reins. You're the starting quarterback. We're going to do everything we can to support you. We're going to put the wind at your back. We're going to do everything we possibly can to put you in position to succeed. Here you are, Anthony Richardson. Here's all the resources we have for you. If he doesn't succeed, if his completion percentage is under 50% again, if he gets injured again, if the effort issues are there, if the field vision, all of the issues that we've seen with Anthony Richardson, if they repeat again this season, now you know absolutely for sure, with no caveats and with nothing else in the back of your mind, you know that Anthony Richardson is not the franchise quarterback of the Indianapolis Colts, and you know that we need to go into a different direction. So by going all in on Anthony Richardson, that's what we do. Either A, he succeeds and we say, okay, we were good. We were right to give him another year. He is our franchise quarterback. We can win a Super Bowl one day with him. We're going to move forward with him as our starting quarterback. Or he's bad, and then you look around and say, okay, now we understand. we move on from Anthony Richardson, we draft another quarterback or grab one from free agency, whatever the move, that's a conversation for another time. At least now we've given Anthony Richardson truly every opportunity we possibly could have given him before being able to fairly move on. And by bringing in Daniel Jones, the same worst-case scenario was true, right? The worst-case scenario is that both of them are bad, and we have to move on from both of them. But the issue is, I think in the back of our mind at the end of the season, we would say, well, what if Anthony Richardson had all the reps as starting quarterback in the preseason? What if Anthony Richardson started every single game? If Daniel Jones ends up starting week 1 and the season goes by the wayside, Anthony Richardson comes in, doesn't play very well, we might wonder what would have happened if we put all of our faith in Anthony Richardson and gave him the starting job from week 1. What would have happened? Then maybe next offseason, if the Daniel Jones experiment doesn't work out, maybe we sit around and we say, well, maybe Anthony Richardson deserves another chance where we go fully all in on him, and then we've wasted this season and potentially are wasting a second. I think that what Indianapolis needs to do and what Indianapolis is doing is accepting the fact that the worst-case scenario is that this season is a complete waste. That could happen if we go all in on Anthony Richardson and he fails. But that's okay in my opinion. It's worth the risk because if he succeeds, we know he's good. We know he's the guy. And if he fails, then we can fully understand and know that we're making the right decision by moving on from him and fully understand and know that finding a new quarterback, finding a new vision for the future is the best decision for Indianapolis. I worry that splitting the reps in the preseason and splitting the reps throughout the season between these two quarterbacks is going to limit the ceiling of both of them and potentially minimize the opportunity for success for both of them, only increasing the likelihood that we're going to move on from both of them at the end of this season, and then we're back where we started. And in the back of our minds, we might wonder, what would have happened if we went all in on Anthony Richardson? Would he have succeeded, and would we have our franchise quarterback? Maybe he's capable of something that we're not aware of, and we need this one last season to give him the opportunity to prove it. I don't know if we'll fully be able to maximize that opportunity by bringing in Daniel Jones and splitting reps. Now, I don't love it, right? For all those reasons that I just outlined, I don't love this move, but I am willing to be proven wrong. Sam Darnold, great example of a guy that absolutely proved everybody wrong, led the Vikings to a 14-3 season. Yeah, that completely fell apart at the end, but now he's in Seattle, and he's kind of proven that he's able to be a starting quarterback in the NFL in 2025. Maybe Daniel Jones turns into the next Sam Darnold. Maybe Indianapolis is the spot for him, right? Maybe this does light a fire under Anthony Richardson. Maybe the people smarter than me in the Colts front office see something that I don't. I'm willing to watch it all play out, but I'm not confident that this is the best approach for the reasons that I outlined before. Again, my preference is that we go all in on Anthony Richardson for this season. We don't have to extend him. We don't have to guarantee him a future with Indianapolis. I think this season, the best decision is to give Anthony Richardson everything we can possibly give him. And if we go 8-9 again, then we know that's our ceiling with Anthony Richardson, unless something external out of our control occurs, like some complete injury purge or something like that. If we give Anthony Richardson a team around him that I would describe to be a playoff caliber team and we'll talk about these moves in the secondary in a little bit, but after we've retooled the secondary, right after the draft, I think we'll have a playoff caliber roster if you take away the quarterbacks from every single team. Then we just have to find out if Anthony Richardson is a quarterback or a playoff caliber quarterback, And that's going to be the question that we would answer this season by going all in on him. And if it doesn't work out, we know that our chapter with Anthony Richardson is over, and it's time to take this playoff caliber roster and reset with the rookie quarterback or reset with a veteran quarterback through free agency. That's my preference, right? I want to give our young first-round pick at least one more year, giving him the absolute best chance to succeed and not having any other distractions. I understand the fact that you want to provide him with competition. You want to kind of force him to outcompete somebody else in the locker room. That's all true, but in my opinion, if Anthony Richardson is the guy, if he is the franchise quarterback in Indianapolis, he already has to be motivated because he got benched last season as the starter, right? He's struggled. He's had a bad year. He understands the fact, whether he listens to the media or not, he understands the fact that this is his last shot to prove that he deserves a place in the NFL and he deserves a place as the starting quarterback in Indianapolis. This is his one last year to prove that that's true. Maybe bringing in Daniel Jones and providing him a true competition, is what optimizes that potential, the potential for him to succeed this year. But I just don't think so, right? Because again, if he's your guy, he's already motivated. And in my opinion, with Anthony Richardson, within the context of this situation, increasing his reps is what is most important because we know that that's one of his biggest issues is not having experience and a lot of the flaws that we see in Anthony Richardson come from not having as much experience in college and in the NFL due to injury, due to benching, whatever it is, due to obviously his college career being a little bit skinnier than most than most players at this stage in their careers. Anthony Richardson hasn't played a lot. He hasn't taken a lot of reps, and whether it's in practice, whether it's in games, I think that he has to be the guy. So he better go out and win this QB battle right away in training camp. Otherwise, I think that he's going to be a step behind his potential. He's going to be a little bit more limited than he would have been if he was the only guy in the room in terms of his potential, and that worries me because I fear, again, the bottom line is that this will be a wasted season, which I'm willing to accept in the long term. This will be a wasted season, but we won't be fully assured that the decision we make at the end of the wasted season is the right one. Because again, if Anthony Richardson fails and Daniel Jones fails, maybe in the back of our mind we'll be thinking, what would have happened if we went all in on Anthony Richardson? Would he have performed better? Would we be in a more optimistic mood going into 2026 than we are coming away from 2025 if we had made that decision instead? That's my fear. That's my worry. But again, I'm willing to be proven wrong. Maybe Daniel Jones is awesome. Maybe he's not awesome, but maybe this level of competition is what makes Anthony Richardson awesome, right? I have no idea. I'm willing to be proven wrong. It is March. We haven't seen the draft. We haven't seen the rest of free agency play out. We have no idea where Aaron Rodgers is going to play, if anywhere, right? It's very early. It's the day after this move happens. I'm willing to watch the offseason play out. I'm willing to watch training camp play out, and I'm willing to watch the preseason and eventually week one and be able to say then, as the season progresses, whether or not we made the right decision and what the right decision would be moving forward. But right now, I'm hesitant. I'm skeptical of this decision to bring in Daniel Jones, and I certainly am interested to see how it goes from here. Okay, the Colts were not done with just the move for Daniel Jones. They made some other moves in free agency. There's the offensive line, there's the safety position, and there's the cornerback position. So really, it's quarterback, offensive line, and the secondary that have seen some significant changes over the course of the first couple days of free agency. I want to talk about the O-line first. I want to go negative and then end on a positive note because we lost Will Fries and Ryan Kelly to Minnesota. This is problematic and a bit concerning, right? By the way, Minnesota absolutely is retooling themselves to potentially putting themselves in position to win a Super Bowl with J.J. McCarthy, and if not, get very close and maybe the next year win a Super Bowl. The Vikings are a team absolutely with an open Super Bowl window, which is really interesting because they're moved on from Sam Darnold, making different decisions at quarterback. I find that very fascinating. But they stole Will Fries and Ryan Kelly from Indianapolis. The Colts may be able to reload with the depth that they have on the roster already, and it is a very deep offensive line group in the upcoming draft, but regardless, the Colts are going to need more. I was looking at the depth chart following this move, and I felt a little bit worrisome, right? The Colts are going to need more. Maybe it occurs in free agency the rest of the way. Maybe it occurs in the draft, probably both, right? But the Colts are going to need more, and I don't know. I think the Colts offensive line is more likely than not going to diminish in quality going from 2024 to 2025 because losing Will Fries and Ryan Kelly are some pretty big losses. That's two starters right there. We re-signed Braden Smith. We still have Quentin Nelson, right? And there's a lot of sort of backfill guys in the second and third tier of the depth chart that could theoretically, potentially put themselves in position to succeed as a starter, but there's going to need to be more rebuilding of the offensive line, and I'm apprehensive about that, and that especially makes me apprehensive because, again, if we want to give Anthony Richardson and even Daniel Jones as much resources as possible as it may take for them to succeed, the offensive line kind of needs to be good, and if this is going to be a playoff team with this quarterback situation, the offensive line kind of needs to be good. So I'm concerned about the losses of Will Fries and Ryan Kelly. I'm interested to see how this team reloads, how this team rebuilds, and what they do moving forward to, again, retool that offensive line. But this is a concern for me for now. And I wanted to say that first so I can get it out of the way because we have much more exciting and happy things to talk about after this. I'm just a little bit worrisome about the Colts considering their offensive line losses and Will Fries and Ryan Kelly. We'll see how things go. But there's going to need to be more. They can't be done with the offensive line. This should not be a finished product for Indianapolis. Whether it's the draft, it's probably the draft, or if it is the rest of free agency as well, maybe some trades here or there, some waiver wire sign. I don't know what it's going to be. The Colts are going to have to retool the offensive line to some degree. Now they can because their focus in the draft kind of shifted. Because if you remember from a couple episodes ago, if you were watching, I said that I wanted the Colts to grab a safety or a corner in free agency, and whichever one they didn't get, I wanted that in the draft. Now, I said that kind of conservatively, understanding the fact that this is Chris Ballard, and we're probably not going to make two big-time moves in the offseason in free agency for both a safety and a corner, and that ended up being exactly what Chris Ballard did. We grabbed a safety from Minnesota. His name is Cam Bynum. We grabbed a corner from San Francisco. His name is Tyrese Ward. I'm going to talk about each. Cam Bynum was a huge move right out of the gate. Right as free agency opened, a 4-year deal to Cam Bynum. This is a big deal because obviously the secondary was poor already. We let up almost a 70% pass completion rate from opposing quarterbacks throughout the year. Julian Blackmon becomes a free agent as well. I'm interested to see how his re-signing goes. We were already poor on the secondary. The safety position needed help, and we absolutely filled that need with the addition of Cam Bynum. He hasn't missed a game in 3 seasons, right? He's the absolute opposite of injury-prone. He had 3 interceptions and 10 pass deflections last season with Minnesota, the critical piece to a long-term great secondary, and he's paired with Tyrese Ward. Again, corner from San Francisco, 3-year deal, $60 million. So right here, what Indianapolis is doing is kind of setting the core in place of what could be a great secondary. If this team's going to win a Super Bowl in the next few years, if it's going to win a Super Bowl in the prime years of Anthony Richardson, this secondary is going to be a big part of it, and they put themselves in position to maintain that secondary moving forward. Cam Bynum, Tyrese Ward, they absolutely went all in on these 2 guys. Anarumo is going to need talent as a defensive coordinator, and now he has talent, right? We saw what Anarumo was able to do with talent in Cincinnati. He brought that team and that defense to a Super Bowl. And then that talent sort of fell by the wayside, and so did Anarumo, and so did that Bengals defense. And shockingly, the Bengals gave up on Anarumo. The Colts kind of get a steal in bringing him in as defensive coordinator, and now we're supplying him with talent that could potentially create a defense capable of doing what the Bengals did in 2021. The only caveat to this is Cam Bynum, again, 4-year deal. I believe they're both $60 million deals. Now I think about it. It's $15 million a year to Cam Bynum. It's $20 million a year to Tyrese Ward. That's a big financial commitment. The long-term nature of it is totally fine because I think both of these are reliable, effective playmakers. I think they're going to be great. I love both of these moves. The only caveat is how much money we're spending on this, right? Because again, the one potential benefit to grabbing a safety in free agency and a corner in the draft or vice versa is that one of those players is very inexpensive because we know that rookies on rookie year deals don't cost a lot. So if you could find a great rookie in the draft in the NFL, you're in a great position to create a great position group because you have fantastic players that you don't have to pay a lot. You can kind of, spend more money on the rest of the position group, the rest of the roster as a whole. This Cam Bynum and Tyrese Ward combo is going to take a lot of money out of the pockets of Chris Ballard, and that is a significant loss. And it's not going to end up being a loss because I think both of these guys are going to produce, and they're both going to pan out, and they're both going to be fantastic, but it's important to keep in mind. So the secondary now is a position group that we're spending a lot of money on, which is what we wanted, and that's what we wanted to see. So again, I'm not complaining at all. I'm just saying that's the only caveat. I'm glad we're going a different direction because for a while, Chris Ballard was focused on grabbing guys from the draft and low-level free agents and not spending a lot on the secondary and hoping it would work out, and it hasn't, and it definitely didn't at the end of last season. So I'm glad that we're making a change and spending big money on the secondary, but just notice the trickle-down effect, right? A good roster isn't free. So we're putting a lot of focus on the secondary, which likely to me tells me that we're going to be trying to retool the offensive line through the draft, which is a dangerous business because with this drafty and low-level signing of low-level free agents, that's a dangerous decision to make with the offensive line because if you miss in the draft or if you miss on a free agent, you really miss. And the offensive line is a position group that it's very, very important not to miss on. The secondary within the context of the Colts is another position group like that. So again, I want to make myself very clear. I love this move. I love the decision to grab Tyrese Ward and Cam Bynum. I am totally okay with the amount that we're paying them. I am totally okay with the amount of time that we're committing to them and committing them to us, perhaps more importantly. I said I wanted a safety in a draft and a quarterback in free agency or vice versa, and we got both right out of the gate, right? So this is fantastic, and Chris Ballard clearly is a bit more gutsy. This is what it takes to create Super Bowl winning teams. I love what we're doing with Cam Bynum, Tyrese Ward, and the rest of this secondary. I like what we're doing with the defense. Anarumo is going to have talent. He's going to have resources. He's going to have these guys to work with, and I love that. We just have to be careful about the way we're retooling the offensive line after the loss of Fries and Kelly. Now, fortunately, we can shift our focus in the draft away from the secondary just a bit and focus on the offensive line a bit more, look to retool that. If we hit on Bynum and hit on Ward, as I think we will, and then we hit in the draft, maybe we get Tyler Warren, maybe we get more offensive linemen, probably both. this could be a playoff team if the quarterback position pans out. There's a lot of questions. A lot really has to go our way for that to happen, but this could be a 10, 11, 12 win team next year if the quarterback position pans out, if the secondary pans out, I think it will, and if the offensive line doesn't become a liability with the loss of Will Fries and Ryan Kelly and the amount of money we're spending on Bynum and Ward. Great moves in the secondary. The secondary looks fantastic now. The offensive line, a bit weaker, but we have time to retool it, especially in the draft. We have time to rebuild it coming into 2025. I love what Ballard is doing. I love what this defense looks like now, and I'm very excited to watch this team take the field in week 1 with Cam Bynum and Charvarius Ward on the roster, as well as whoever else we grab throughout the rest of free agency and, of course, the draft. I love these moves. I love what the Colts are doing, and I'm very excited to see it all play out on the field this fall. Okay, we're done with the Colts. We've spent 25 minutes on the Colts so far. We've got a lot of basketball to talk about. I want to talk about the Big Ten tournament. We're going to talk about Indiana. We're going to preview their Big Ten tournament games, or at least the one guaranteed game that they have. Indiana is the 9 seed in the Big Ten tournament. They will rematch Oregon at 12 o'clock on Thursday. Today is Wednesday at about 1 p.m. as I record this. Joe Lunardi has the Hoosiers in the last 4 in category. They're the second team down in the last 4 in category, so theoretically there's 2 spots of room for error, I suppose, according to Lunardi on the bubble. Xavier and Ohio State both below. Indiana is the last teams in. Boise State first team out. Indiana's just above those 3 teams that I mentioned. Jerry Palm has the Hoosiers safely in the field as a 10 seed. So some discrepancy in the bracketology as to where the Hoosiers fall. None of it matters. What matters is the selection committee. The situation to me is winning in, right? Because Indiana right now is in the field, according to both bracketologists, and I'm sure the committee would agree. If you beat Oregon and lose to Michigan State, great. You beat another team that's going to be in the tournament. You beat a tournament caliber team and then lost to a team that's probably a Final Four contender and certainly the Big Ten champion, of course, from the regular season. They won by 3 games. Totally acceptable loss, totally impressive win in the Big Ten tournament. That's what Indiana has to do, win and in. Lose to Oregon, and now we kind of have to start thinking about what Indiana is going to end up doing in the NCAA tournament in terms of whether or not they're going to qualify. Xavier plays on the same day. If they win, it's a new conversation. Ohio State, if they go on a run and they end up being relevant, even though Indiana beat them twice, it's a new conversation. There's some key Mountain West battles, Boise State, Colorado State. Somebody has to win. The SEC as well, Texas, Oklahoma on the bubble. So if you lose, things get a little bit dicey, and it comes down to Selection Sunday, and it comes down to sort of some of these other bubble matchups in terms of whether or not Indiana's making the tournament. You make it very simple by just winning. And after you win, there's, of course, conversation of whether or not this is a first 4 team headed to Dayton, or this is a surefire tournament team across the board that's of course into the route of 64 automatically. If you win, you're in the tournament. That's all it is to me with Indiana. And this Oregon game, as a result, is a big deal. Oregon is in the tournament most likely. I don't see a world where Oregon doesn't make it. But for Indiana, this is crucial. They just lost to Oregon at Oregon. It was close the whole game until Shellstead pulled away and took over in the final minutes. He had 8 points in 90 seconds. Oregon closed on a 10-0 run and ended up winning by just over double digits. The Hoosiers played well, though. They hit some tough shots. Ballo had a double-double. They didn't have quite the gas to match Shellstead in the end. They let up a 10-0 run to lose on the road, as I mentioned, and now they have to win the rematch. So because they lost that game, and then, of course, followed up with a win against Ohio State, now they have to win the rematch in order to guarantee themselves a spot in the tournament. How can it be different this time, right? Number one, it's important to note that it's a pseudo-home game, right? Gainbridge Fieldhouse is effectively a home game. Oregon fans travel well. I'm not gonna denounce that idea. But Indiana's playing in Indianapolis, and they're playing against a team from the Pacific time zone. This is a pseudo-home game for Indiana. That is going to allow the game to potentially bounce in their favor, knowing that last time they went all the way out to Oregon. But the number one issue for me, for Indiana, is defensively winning the ISOs against Jackson Shellstead, because Jackson Shellstead, again, is a takeover guy. He's a guy that in the final minutes, when it's a tie ball game, 64-64, he can make it 74-64 and win the game that way. That's exactly what he did. Oregon was, again, neck and neck with Indiana the whole time, even at Oregon, and Jackson Shellstead took over at the end. So winning the ISO against Jackson Shellstead is very important. Somebody has to go wire to wire with Shellstead for 40 minutes. Now, is it Galloway? Is it Leal? I have no idea. We'll find out and see sort of if we're going back to Galloway in terms of defending Shellstead, or if Coach Wisden's going to make a different decision on that. but somebody's going to have to go wire to wire to Shelstad and at least limit him the whole time if they're going to have to. If IU has to resort to doubling Shelstad or putting in some zone schemes to really scheme Shelstad away from the hoop, I don't know if that's going to work out for Indiana. I don't know if that's going to be what they're looking for. And honestly, Shelstad didn't play that well in this game in the regular season. He just showed up in the final minutes and, of course, won it. So it was not Shelstad's best game against Indiana in the regular season. He has more in the tank, but we saw a flash of what he's capable of and what he will be capable of in the tournament with those final 90 seconds in which he scored 8 points and ended up knocking the Hoosiers off in Oregon. So, again, the ISO defensively against Shelstad. You can't allocate too many resources to him defensively. If somebody can go wire to wire and at least limit him throughout the game, whether that's Galloway, whether that's Leal, Indiana is sitting pretty in a pseudo-home game in the Big Ten tournament, in a must-win game. They absolutely have the capability to win. Again, Oregon's probably a 6 seed. They're in the tournament no matter what. Indiana's on the bubble. This is a better team that Indiana is facing, right? Oregon is better across the board. Their resume, their talent theoretically, the way their team is built, Oregon's better. So Indiana's got to beat a team better than them in order to guarantee themselves a spot in the NCAA tournament. They can prove they deserve it by beating an NCAA tournament caliber opponent. This is how it happens, right? It happens right here in Gainbridge Fieldhouse, and it happens defensively in the isolation against Jackson Shelstad. The other pivot point outside of Shelstad is Indiana having blown opportunities late in games all year long. They kind of just run out of gas at the end of games. The Oregon game, the Maryland game, the UCLA game, Purdue the first time, etc. Plenty of examples of Indiana down the stretch falling apart and losing to an opponent that certainly seemed beatable and was either not quite at their level in the standings or above it. Regardless, Indiana has blown games at the end against teams that are tournament caliber and do have potential to make runs in the NCAA tournament, implying that Indiana is at the level of teams that are capable of making runs in the NCAA tournament. They just haven't been able to beat most of them because they, again, run out of gas at the end. This is a tournament team. The Indiana's a tournament team if they win this game, right? At this time of year, running out of gas at the end of in the final minutes at the end of games is absolutely unacceptable. You have to go out and win it in clutch time. This is the moment for Indiana to prove that they are a tournament team, not just because their resume would probably be good enough with another test against Oregon falling in favor of the Hoosiers, but also because Oregon's a tournament team. It's a great team with a lot of upside and a lot of potential once we get to the actual tournament. Indiana's got to beat them to prove and show, hey, in a neutral site, in a big game against a great player, Jackson Shelstad, and a great team in Oregon, we're capable of going out and winning, and that will then imply that if Indiana ends up as a 10 seed, that they can go out and beat a 7, like Oregon would be. This feels like a first-round game of the NCAA tournament for a lot of reasons. Indiana winning it, to me, proves that they deserve their place in the NCAA tournament. They may not need to win it, but it'd be very, very nice if they did, and it'd be very, very reassuring if they did, and they wouldn't have to sweat on Selection Sunday just with this win on Thursday of the Big Ten tournament. It is simply that simple. Again, Indiana runs out of gas. You cannot run out of gas. And similarly, you have to go wire to wire with Shelstad, because, again, Shelstad was pretty limited for most of that game until Indiana ran out of gas and Shelstad took over and Oregon ends up winning. So, Indiana, keep your foot on the gas. You can't let the tank run to empty, and you have to go wire to wire with Shelstad. It's a pseudo-home game. It's a must-win game for Indiana. The momentum is on your side after that Ohio State win as well. Go wire to wire with Shelstad and don't run out of gas as a team at the end of the game. And Indiana has a very good chance of winning this game and a very good chance of going to the NCAA tournament. Again, with a win here, they're in the tournament, in my opinion. Then they would go on to play Michigan State, who they did beat on the road this month, right? This is the 1 seed in the Big Ten that in the last few weeks they knocked off on the road. UCLA is also the 4 on their side of the bracket. It's not unthinkable to suggest that Indiana has a chance to go on a big-time run, but it all starts in the early window on Thursday, right? It's this simple. The rest of the Big Ten tournament is just noise, in my opinion. If Indiana beats Oregon, they're in the tournament. They're in the NCAA tournament. And if they lose, then you're really going to have to start thinking about it, and you're really going to have to start sweating about bid thieves and sweating about Xavier and Ohio State and Boise State and the Mountain West and the SEC and everything else like that on Selection Sunday. A win makes it simple. Indiana's in. I think that's all there is to it. And then after that, great. If you keep winning and knock off the 1 seed and go on to win the whole thing, great. Right now the focus is beating Oregon, and right now the focus is qualifying for the NCAA tournament as a result. It all starts on the early window on Thursday. It also could all end in the early window on Thursday. A big swing in this 8-9 matchup in the Big Ten tournament. I'm very excited to watch it all play out. Indiana can secure, in my opinion, a place in the NCAA tournament with a win over Oregon. They've got to go wire to wire with Shellstead. They've got to not let their gas tank run to empty by the end of the second half, and that's how Indiana's going to get this one done. That's what I have to say about the Hoosiers. Okay, we're not done with the Big Ten tournament. I want to talk about Purdue. Purdue is the 6th seed in the Big Ten tournament. They are playing for seeding in the NCAA tournament, in my opinion. Lunardi has the Boilermakers in as a 4 seed. Palm has the same. I think that depending on how the Big Ten tournament and the rest of the conference tournaments go, Purdue could slide up to a 3 seed or fall to a 5 seed. They, of course, could also stay at the 4. That makes these games important because there's some scary 13 seeds out there, right? If I'm a Purdue fan, and I am, I don't want to see them play High Point. I don't want to see them play Lipscomb. I don't want to see them play Akron, right? Those are all 13 seeds. Yale is the other one, according to Jerry Palm. And then if you slide down to 5, the 12s like Drake and Liberty are also terrifying. McNeese State, terrifying. There's some scary 13s and 12s. Now, there's a drop-off. The 14s are certainly not as terrifying as any of these, but I would not be feeling great as a 4 seed or a 5 seed against any one of these 13s or 12s. So Purdue ultimately needs to put themselves in position to force their way up to the 3. Now, it's not entirely in their control, right? We need the teams above them to lose. Purdue, of course, needs to keep winning. It's very volatile. There's no clear-cut method to securing a 3 seed in this tournament. Purdue starts on Thursday playing the winner of Rutgers and USC. Now, Purdue hung 100 on Rutgers this month. They're 3-0 against these two teams. They beat USC 90-72 at home as well. This first game should be a breeze. No matter who it is, Purdue should have no problem against Rutgers or, similarly, have no problem against USC. And then that's when the challenging games arise. Michigan is the 3 seed, who Purdue split the season series against, right? I wouldn't be shocked if this was a win at all whatsoever. And then it's Maryland, it's Michigan State, if chalk holds, and that to me is workable, right? Purdue, of course, beat Maryland. They have beaten Michigan. They are capable probably of beating Michigan State, right? This Purdue team is in a situation where, again, the Big Ten's wide open. The Big Ten tournament's going to be chaos, and Purdue absolutely is a team capable of circumventing that chaos. Michigan hasn't been playing their best basketball at the end of the year, right? That's a beatable team. That puts Purdue in the semifinals, right? And then there's a situation where it's just Maryland who they've beaten already, and then Michigan State. If Michigan State even makes it that far, it's a workable schedule, right? It's a workable portion of the bracket. I think Purdue absolutely has the ability to get anywhere up until winning the tournament, right? I think absolutely Purdue could win the Big Ten tournament. I think a ton of teams could win the Big Ten tournament. It's a very wide open bracket. Purdue has a favorable run to the title, especially if they get hot at the right time, especially knowing that they sort of have the ability to build momentum leading into March Madness. A loss on Thursday is very unlikely, but it's possible. That likely has a pretty high chance of dropping Purdue to the 5 line if the teams around them win, and I think that dooms their season, especially if they catch a team like Drake in the tournament. Now, Purdue also could win the Big Ten tournament championship. That pushes it to the 3 line. It's much easier. It's a much easier path to the Sweet 16. No scary 13s or no scary. What am I saying? No scary 14s, 12s. At that point, they'd of course play a 14 and then had a tough game in the second round. But Purdue could be a 3 seed, especially if they win the Big Ten tournament championship. Pick up a lot of great quad 1 quality wins on the way. There's some big games ahead, right? Again, I think it's a favorable draw for Purdue. There's plenty of hope for the Boilermakers. I think that they absolutely are capable of doing great things moving forward. But this is a workable schedule, right? This is absolutely a workable, favorable bracket, and I think Purdue has the ability to go as far as they really want to and as far as they really can, and I think they're capable of doing anything up until winning the championship, up through winning the championship. It starts on Thursday. It's a winnable game. It should be easy. That plants you in the quarterfinals against Michigan, a winnable game, and it's just winnable game after winnable game after winnable game. And, of course, theoretically, they get tougher as they go, but Purdue has a great position to not only win the Big Ten tournament championship, but just build momentum ahead of the NCAA tournament, which is absolutely a team that is kind of hot and cold like Purdue. That's exactly what they need moving forward. I want to avoid High Point. I want to avoid Drake. I want to secure the best seeding possible, put Purdue in the best position possible to make the second weekend. And these next few games of the Big Ten tournament are absolutely critical to that. Okay, Tyrese Haliburton. This I feel like we just need to talk about. We haven't been podcasting as similar or as consistently as usual. A lot of trips. Went to a radio conference in New York this past weekend, going to Alabama this next weekend. So we're kind of at one show a week right now. But I want to talk about Tyrese Haliburton. Last night, he just sealed a massive victory for the Pacers. This game was on national TV. It was back and forth the whole time. Lane defense was a continued issue for Indiana. Brook Lopez had 23, Giannis had 19, Taurean Prince had 18, Kyle Kuzma had 9. Milwaukee, as most teams do, had whatever they wanted to have inside. But Indiana stuck with them offensively, right? It was a shootout the whole game. It was, 60-point first half for each team, 60-57, I believe it was, at halftime. Back and forth the whole way through. It ended with a bang. The Pacers were down and out, right? They were down 3 with 6 seconds left. Call a timeout. Nesmith, down 2, misses a floater but gets fouled and only makes 1 free throw. That should be game over. Milwaukee should be sealing it from there. And they did everything they needed to do down the stretch, right? Lillard made his free throws. But Tyrese Haliburton on the other end ended this game with a bang. An incredible drawn-up play from Rick Carlisle. Perfect execution, and the Pacers win, of course, with that corner 3 off balance. Horizontal, falling out of bounds, and the foul to put the Pacers up 1. It was unbelievable. And the Pacers, of course, win this game against Milwaukee, basically at the buzzer. Milwaukee, I think, was better on the day, but Indiana, of course, pulled out the win. If this is what a Bucks series Pacers is going to a Bucks Pacers series would look like, I'm all for it, right? Right now, these teams are the 4 and the 5 in the East. It's a little bit scary, and we'll talk about this in a second, but there's 3 teams tied for the 4 seed right now. It's these 2 and then Detroit. It seems like we're pigeonholing ourselves into a 4-5 matchup between the Pacers and the Bucks. The rest of the regular season is only existing to determine which team has home court advantage in Game 7 and which team has home court advantage in that series as a whole. But right now, with this win, Milwaukee, Indiana, and Detroit are now all tied, 18.5 games back of Cleveland. There's 18 games left to play. Indiana plays Milwaukee on Saturday. That's it for the head-to-head between these 3 until Milwaukee has a home-and-home with Detroit on April 11th and April 13th. Those are the last 2 games of the regular season for both teams. With momentum, I want the Pacers to build a lead because that final week does not really stack in Indiana's favor, right? The Pacers play the Cavs twice. That's tough. And between the Bucks and the Pistons, one of those teams has to win both of those games. It doesn't matter who it is. One of those teams has to win. So I want to see the Pacers build a lead, and this Bucks win was critical to doing exactly that. The Bucks game on Saturday will also be critical to exactly that. I'm interested to see if the Pacers are able to actually make this happen for themselves and actually able to mount a lead. Again, 18 games left in the regular season. The Pacers go back to Milwaukee on Saturday. It's a 3-way tie for the 4 seed, but Tyrese Haliburton, what a superstar in the NBA, putting the Pacers on top, lifting them to a victory over the Bucks at home when it was very unlikely that would occur. I'm very excited about the Pacers. I'm looking forward to seeing how they move forward, and I want to see if they can secure the 4 seed in the East. Okay, real quick, we're going to finish up this show with talking about quarterback movement in free agency. There was a lot of movement. I want to just quickly whip around each major quarterback change. Geno Smith is headed to Las Vegas. That's an era in Seattle that is over. Geno Smith is now pairing with Pete Carroll, Tom Brady, Max Crosby. Vegas is far away from the playoffs, but we'll see how far they can get with a rebuild around Geno Smith in his final couple years. I'm interested to see how this goes. I'm interested to see. I don't think they're going to win a Super Bowl with Geno Smith, but he's a good stopgap quarterback to really rebuild around to then find the next franchise quarterback for Las Vegas as they build themselves back up to a playoff caliber franchise. It's a fun move, but I don't really care. To be honest, I don't think much is going to happen with Vegas with Geno Smith, but maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. Justin Fields to New York is a more exciting one. It's a low-risk, high-reward contract. It's a team that was scarred by the Aaron Rodgers experiment. Justin Fields is younger. He has a more lucrative play style. He could theoretically be easier to build around because we understand the fact that Justin Fields has more longevity in the NFL at this point compared to Aaron Rodgers. Potentially, this is a step in the right direction for Justin Fields and the New York Jets. I'm excited to see where they can take things as they rebuild around him. Sam Darnold to Seattle kind of confuses me. Metcalf is gone. He's in Pittsburgh. Tyler Lockett is gone. Can they give Darnold enough weapons to replicate the Minnesota division? Because Darnold is great if he has weapons around him, right? Yes, JSN is still there. Yes, the Seahawks still have some degree of talent on the offense. They have to give him more. It might take a couple years. Sam Darnold is still young. I'm interested to see what they can do moving forward with Sam Darnold. I don't know if it's going to be much. How long will it take? Do they have enough time in Sam Darnold's prime years of his career? I don't know, but Seattle's rebuilding. They're probably the closest team to a Super Bowl out of these three, and Sam Darnold last season was the closest to a Super Bowl out of these three. It's a good pairing, and I'm interested to see what they can do with it, but they're going to have to play their cards right if they're going to do so. Okay, that's all I have for you guys today. Good, quick 45 minutes. I want to talk about just the show. We're going to have another show again next Thursday. It's going to be a while. We'll talk about the whole Big Ten tournament. We'll recap that for Indiana and Purdue. We'll sort of preview the NCAA tournament for both teams. We'll have plenty of Placers updates. They've got some big games over the weekend and potentially more Colts news as well. Thank you so much for watching or listening to the Early Bird Podcast with Andrew Garrison. My name, of course, is Andrew Garrison. I will see you all again next Thursday. Have a great week.